have a rule of thumb as a speaker that a good speaker finishes just before the audience does. Now, understand I have 3 hours to make this presentation. Is that not correct? Correct. You weren't paying attention. No, seriously, what time do I need to be done? Somebody needs to clarify that.
20 minutes.
I have 20 minutes. Okay, so I understand that there isn't a great deal of knowledge in the world about emotional intelligence. It really came into its own when a guy by the name of Goldman wrote a book on emotional intelligence in 1995, and it's just been growing exponentially. I have a certification as an emotional intelligence facilitator. I'm also a certified emotional intelligence coach. And if you ask my wife, she says it's made about a 25% improvement in our relationship. I was hoping it would be higher than that, but I just haven't achieved. Now, I have a handout on the table. They're right there in the center of the table. I'd like you to grab one of those because that is my version of the 9 elements of emotional health. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to speed through it fairly fast. I'm going to combine some issues because the only presentation I can be sure to make in 20 minutes is one I've been making for quite a while on the principles of emotional health. So some of them will be combined, but what I'd like to call your attention to is the questionnaire at the top of the page. The 9 elements presented in question form, I would like you to privately, not publicly, but privately rate yourself how true those statements are for you. And get sort of a measure of your own emotional intelligence. And we'll try not to embarrass anybody by asking you to relate that up front. But let me get started. I'm going to follow the EMPOWER acronym. Actually, EMPOWERED. The book I wrote was Empowered Possibilities, Living Your Best Life at Any Age. I wanted to add a couple of elements to it, so it became empowered. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. The first element takes courage and commitment. And I do have them arranged in sort of a hierarchy of effectiveness. The first element takes courage and commitment because it asks you to engage. Now, what does it mean to be engaged? When I was researching words for the acronym that I wanted to use, I ran across the illustration of what a clutch does between the engine and the transmission. When you engage the clutch, what happens? Some of you auto mechanics here, what happens when you engage the clutch? It actually transfers the power of the engine through the transmission to the drivetrain and makes the wheels go round. And that's what it means to engage. It means to become an integral part of something. It means to not stand by and ask what happened, but take an active part in making things happen. I was fortunate, I guess, to be old enough. It didn't concern me about age at the time, but now it bothers me a little bit that I remember President Kennedy's inaugural address where he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you." Who remembers the rest of it? Ask what you can do for your country. And we don't hear much of that today, do we? But an engaged person is willing to make the contribution that is necessary. An engaged person is willing to take the courage to be a part of something important. And I like to use the illustration of Rotary. What you get engaged in has got to be important to you. And it occurs to me that there are 4 key questions to ask yourself about whether you want to be engaged in something or not. And I'll bet some of you even know what those questions are. Is it the truth? If it is, you might want to consider getting engaged in it. What's the next one? Somebody tell me. Is it fair to all concerned? That's important. Truthful fairness. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? What better criteria is there for determining whether you want to be engaged in something than the 4-way Rotary test? The 4-way Rotary test. So do you have the courage to get engaged? And what does it mean to be engaged? There are some disturbing statistics about people who are engaged and who are not. The Gallup organization measures and surveys about anything that moves. You just moved, you're probably in a Gallup survey right now. That's how it works. But they do a workforce study almost every year, and the statistics seldom change. It is quite evident that only 30% of the people in the workforce are engaged in what they do. And that's very sad. Why is engagement so important? You've got 30% of your workforce doing most of the work, creating most of the goodwill. You've got 50% who couldn't care less, and you've got 20% who are actively disengaged. Now, I don't think that's true of a Rotary Club, but I am concerned about the first two categories. I don't know what it's like in the Lake Buena Vista Rotary. You seem to have a lot of energy, you seem to have a lot of commitment. I think that's great. But in Apopka, I know that in our club membership of about 40 that actively attend meetings, there are less than 10 people who do almost all the work. And that's true in the workforce, most people's workforce. And the first principle of emotional health is to get involved in something you can get engaged with. The second is to maximize the opportunities that come your way with a clear definition of what your dream is. Do we dream anymore? Do we have a dream? Do we have goals? Do we have strong desires to leave a legacy? Because that used to be very important. I've heard recently that most people can tell you the names of their grandparents on both sides. A few can tell you the names of their great-grandparents, but hardly anybody knows anything beyond that in terms of their lineage. And what does that suggest about the survivability of the contributions of the average person? Not so good. Not so good. So if you want to make a difference, not only get engaged, but maximize with a clear plan for engagement. That's an important step in emotional intelligence. People with emotional intelligence know where they're going and have a clear plan for how to get there. Now, what do we know about goals? New Year's resolutions, a form of goal. I was surprised to realize in doing some research for this presentation that by January 15th of every year, 85% of the New Year's resolutions made are gone. Gone. That probably only 14% of people write their goals down or have goals and they don't write them down. You got 3 to 5% who actually write them down, and guess who achieves? The people who write them down. So somewhere I have my list of goals. It's left out on a table somewhere. One of my goals is to remember where I put things. And I'm not doing well with that one. But I thought, man, this is great in clarifying my vision. But chances are that very few of you have ever taken the time to write your goals down. Some of you say, well, I'm retired, I'm done, no more goals. That's not true. Oh, you found him. He found my goals. Maybe that website that was saying Canada for President, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. Yeah, but I wrote these down. Build $1 million business in my life business using my personality test. Have a speaking business, which I have, but I want to raise my rates. So there's a rate raise there. Finish the latest book I'm writing on. Be debt free. Take my family on at least one major vacation. You get the idea. But suddenly it seems real to me now that I've written them down. I'm one of those guys that did fairly well professionally and personally in life without ever writing anything down, but I realize now as I look back it's a pretty twisted trail that I followed. Jumping from one shiny object to another, so write them down. People who write them down achieve more, and you're never too old. You're never too old. So that's the M. EMP, preserve your body. You know, you only get one body as far as I know. You can have various parts of your anatomy replaced, various organs can be replaced, but as far as I know, there's no such thing as a total body replacement. But there is physical fitness. And if nothing else, remember this: a fit old person looks better than an unfit old person. I like to use myself as an example of physical fitness.
Now grown together.
Yeah, look, what you don't understand, grown together is probably what you should do. What you don't understand is this is unrealized height potential. I'm expecting a growth spurt almost any day. You know, right now if I'd hit, I think I'd hit 6'2" or 6'3". Give me the holidays and I think I can go to 6'5". But my favorite activity is Zumba. We have any other Zumba enthusiasts here? Huh? Zumba. I can do Zumba. I just did it yesterday for a solid hour. You believe me, don't you? People my age can do Zumba, intensive Zumba. Come on, you believe me. I know you do. All right, she's nodding her head, but I don't sense conviction. But yes, Zumba. And you need two kinds of exercise. One is resistance training, and what does that mean? Weightlifting. And why do you need it? Well, you can use more strength in your body. It improves your balance, but it also is how you build bone mass. And then you need aerobic training for cardio, for your heart, for your endurance, to keep you going. You know, I didn't realize this before, but there is a softball league that has teams in their 80s. And from what I understand, they're pretty good. I wouldn't mind joining a softball team. I'm not in my 80s. I think the 70 classification probably still too good for me, but I'm going to be there when I get to be 80. So preserve your body. It's the only one you're going to get. And food's been my big issue. That's how I got all this height potential. And I heard a guy by the name of Les Brown say one time that there is no food that tastes as good health feels. Very few things feel as good health does. Optimize the opportunities that come your way, and this is really where we hit emotional intelligence very heavily. Attitude. Henry Ford said, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're probably right. And there's a lot of truth in that. Because we build walls around ourselves, and one of the jobs of emotional intelligence is to tear down those walls, to expand our capabilities, because as the title of my spreadsheet or my worksheet says, we were all designed for greatness. I'll cover that in a little bit more detail later. But a positive attitude makes a difference. If you enter a tricky situation with a positive attitude that you can solve, it does get solved better. Optimize your opportunities with a positive attitude. Eliminate the emotional blockages that keep telling you can't do that. It's been tried before. It didn't work. Don't fall victim to that. Now, a lot of what I have learned comes from my goodness, almost 40 years I spent in the field of aging. I worked professionally in the field of aging for quite a number of years, and one day I realized I was doing it. Not just helping other people doing it, but I was doing it. And with successful aging people have some kind of spiritual connection, but maybe more importantly, they're not afraid to laugh, and even to laugh at themselves. Develop your ability to laugh. That's the main point here. Have your ability to laugh. Expand your brain. Did you know that your brain loses about 10,000 neurons a day, but you have about 4 billion of them, so it doesn't sound like a whole lot. But we now know that you can build new neurons with a proper diet and exercise. Exercise that you enjoy. That's why I go to Zumba. I actually enjoy it. Not sure whether I enjoy the exercise or just watching the other people who are so much better than me, but that is important. Expand your brain. Learn something new every day. Try something new every day. Relate to people. This is key in emotional intelligence. Relate to people. If you're a boss, then you need to be aware of the fact, and you may be aware of it intellectually, that people don't leave organizations, they leave other people. Relate to people who are sources of energy to you, because you seldom rise above the level of the people you associate with. So relate to people who are sources of energy to you, and be a source of energy to the people you relate to. Be a source of energy to the people you relate to. Escape the matrix of debt And finally, define your future, define your values, define your goals. Now, what I've just given you is a brief introduction to what would at least be a 3-hour seminar. I would love to do a longer session of this, but the Sergeant of Arms is there. He's got his speaker extraction cane out. And so I thank you for your patience, for your time, and for being able to keep up with how fast I talked.
That's great. Thank you.